Hey, welcome to the Healthy Postnatal Body Podcast with your postnatal expert, Peter Lapp. That, as always, would be me. Today, I am talking about the mistake of focusing too much on the rehab element of postpartum exercise. So postpartum exercise programs that focus only on recovery of like diastasis recti and pelvic girdle pain and all that type of stuff. I'm not saying it's not important. I'm just saying there's more to it than that. And it's important to keep it up. And I'll explain why it's important to be a little bit broader than just focusing on the narrow issues. So without further ado, here we go. Hey, welcome to the Healthy Postnatal Body Podcast for, what are we today? The 16th of Feb 2025. And it's just little old me again this week. I hope you enjoyed last week's interview with Nigel Breyer. Was that last week? I think that was last week. No, last week we did the other one. What was that with Jessica, which was phenomenal, with Jessica Setnick, which I really enjoyed. Pediatric eating disorders and all that type of stuff. I really enjoyed that conversation. So I'm all over the place right now. I've got 3 episodes to edit. I'm a busy bee. And I'm all over the place. I know that next week, for instance, because I just sent that off, we're talking traditional Chinese medicine and how it can help your postpartum recovery, the things to do, what not to do. The problem with the American style traditional Chinese medicine and all that sort of stuff, how the monetization of it kind of goes against what you're really supposed to do, which is with Brian Crawford from Crawford Wellness, which is a phenomenal guy. I love that dude. But this week I am talking about the problem of only focusing on the rehab element of any sort of postpartum program. Now, I've mentioned before that a lot of the programs that say focus on diastasis recti, for instance, they'll just talk about core engagement and work the transverse abdominis, the TVA and all that type of stuff. And that is where their narrow focus is, and how that is a mistake. How I think we should work more on other things as well as, glutes and obliques and blah, 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 blah. All that type of stuff. But I think there's much more. There's a much broader problem. And to indicate what I'm talking about, I'll mention the following. And I have a client who's been with me for, I don't know, a year and a half or so now. Not postpartum, but she had quite a crappy accident, skiing accident, and then a car accident. Very unlucky, like 15 or so years ago. Right? And then she started training for me for health and fitness. 1 or 2 issues from her accidents. Her grip strength on the left side was really poor, and her shoulder. There were a lot of shoulder problems. Again, from the accident from like more than a decade earlier, and it never resolved itself. She'd been very active her entire life, swimming and lifting weights and all that type of stuff, but no one, barring the physio, getting range of motion back, no one had ever really spent any time strengthening up the shoulder. So there were 1 or 2 issues. Right, all she could lift overhead was a 2 kilogram weight with her left arm, and that is, that's not a lot, right? You should, almost everybody should be able to. I've worked with with one of my clients' kids who's 6, and he can do 2.5, right? So it's important for people to be able to lift a little bit more than 2 kg overhead without the weight falling on your head, right? Anyway, she was working with me for about 7-8 months, making great progress, and she went to one of the luxury resorts in Scotland. Up north in Scotland, you know the one. I mean, there's two. There's Archerfield and there's the other one, and it's the other one. I'm not going to name the names of the place, but it's near St Andrews, right? It's one of those nice and expensive £300 a night sort of deals. She went to the gym there, and she was running on the treadmill, and one of the cleaning crew, stuck a vacuum cleaner. I shouldn't laugh, but it's so dumb. Under the treadmill, and she went from 10 mile an hour to 0 instantly, and that caused, as you can imagine, that caused quite a bit of an issue, like a whiplash sort of situation. She went from 10 mile an hour to 0 on the treadmill, and thank God she was very strong and well balanced and all that type of stuff. Otherwise, she would have done a lot of damage. But her entire left hand chain, so all the joints messed up because of the impact, because that was the front foot as she landed on that. That's where the body took most of the impact. So we're talking knees, we're talking hips. And again, the shoulder is back, right? Everything along that chain was messed up. Some neck trouble and all that sort of thing, right? Now, she went to see various, people to help out with stuff, specialists, and get scans, and we kept working together on one or two things, and the shoulder problem went away quite quickly, and the hip problem took a bit longer, but the knee was messed up. There was a lot of soft tissue damage, and that was causing some long-term problems. And I'm not the knee guy, right? It is just not what I do. I know it as a joint, but I'm not a physio, and yeah, I don't focus on that element. So she finds someone to work with. There's a point to this story, I promise. So she finds someone to work with who is a knee specialist, right? And they do a lot of exercises. Worked with him for a couple of months now, and it's all the focus is on the knee. Now, that's great, of course, because the knee needs to be healed, right? That is important. You do bits and pieces around the knee, and you do range of motion stuff and activation stuff, and just general strengthening up of the area around the knee and all that type of stuff. The problem is, of course, that the loss of muscle mass that she's now experienced from focusing too much on the rehab elements, especially in her legs and all that sort of stuff. A lot of strength is gone. A lot of muscle mass is gone. Means that her knee is actually weaker now than it was. Knee pain is a bit less, but the knee is still weaker. if that makes any sense. And because they focus that much on, and I'm still working with her for upper body and core and all that type of stuff, so that's getting stronger, and we're doing bits and pieces. But now she's unhappy because a lot of the progress that was made in the past is now kind of undone. And the issue is not so much that spend too much time focusing on the left knee. The issue is much more about how none of this stuff has translated into doing any movements that can be transferred into life. Right? And this, you find this a lot with postpartum programs as well. So if my client had stopped working with me, for instance, and had only done rehab stuff, and she's got a wonderful team of people around her, right? We're working with 4 or 5 different people are involved in her health. And all of them are really, really good. But if she had stopped working with someone who knows about strength and other things, so upper body stuff, then that would have gone. And we're now seeing that with the legs a little bit. So I had to have a chat with the knee person and say, listen, we need to make sure that the focus is not just on rehab. And the knee person came back and said, no, you can definitely do all that stuff if she wants, but he only cares about the knee and the knee pain, right? The narrow focus therefore doesn't help, right? She'll struggle to run, for instance, because the impact is too much, and her quads are now nowhere near as strong as they used to be, and they could be, right? And the issue is, right, and I'm not throwing anyone under the bus here. I've not named any names anyways, but the deal was that I was going to do the upper body stuff and all that sort of thing. And I would stay away from the legs because I can't clash with someone's rehab. Because we need to know what causes what and all that sort of thing. The issue is that the focus has been so much on knee rehab that the strength element is completely gone, to the point that she can't really comfortably do stiff leg deadlift of any reasonable weight, because she's lost that strength element. Like I said before, there was a problem with her grip when we first started working together a year and a half ago on the left side, so we strengthened that up. That has now dropped again by 25% just because she's ignored it for that long, because the focus was so much on the rehab of the knee that every element around the strengthening of the leg and all the other leg exercises were ignored in favor of just doing exercises for rehabbing the knee. And you see this a lot with postpartum programs. That is the point that I'm getting to. Again, I'm not crapping on anyone. I'm just saying that this is a common problem with postpartum programs. When you have things like a program that only does pelvic floor and core stuff, you're ignoring upper body strength. And a lot of them do this, right? A lot of them, you see a ton of squats in the program, and there should be, but there are no shoulder presses in there. There is no movement up there, picking a weight up and holding it overhead like you would with a baby, right? These things translate into life. And if you do such a thing for too long, where you're only focusing on the core stuff and maybe some glute stuff, if you focus too much on that, then you're going to lose an element of strength that is actually really quite important in the grand scheme of things, right? If that makes any sense. So for a mother, for instance, it's really important to be able to, and I've talked about this a lot, to pick a weight up off the ground and shift it from A to B, whether that's a buggy, a travel seat, or a baby, right? Or a toddler, indeed. It's important to be able to pick something up, move it from, say, the left-hand side to the body, and then up to the other side, or hold it up, or whatever. Be able to throw a kid up in the air is, I think, an important life skill, right? It's without hurting yourself and having the right core activation and all that sort of stuff. But as everybody who has ever done a military press or a shoulder press will tell you, that if your shoulders are not strong enough to perform the exercise with the weight that you're doing it with, your body won't use the right muscles at the right time. And I talk about muscle functionality a lot, right? Core functionality. If you cannot hold reasonable posture, as in for an overhead press, that would be if you cannot prevent yourself leaning back very far because your shoulders are too weak and you need to recruit more muscles and a bit of chest muscles and all that type of stuff, then your core is no longer active during that motion. And all the work you're then doing with regards to pelvic floor and core recovery stuff kind of goes out the window, because you've lost upper body strength to perform that movement effectively. And if you're going to wait the 3 to 6 to 9 months that it takes for normal diastasis to really be 100%. And I know a lot of these programs are selling you the diastasis is a lifelong condition sort of thing, and don't lift heavy things at all anymore, right? That's I heard that in the medical practice the other day. Someone said, you've given birth, don't lift anything heavy for the next 6 months. That's dumb advice. It's stupid. And by anything heavy, they meant 10 kilos. So if you're only focusing on that element and you get weaker in the other bits that you need to be strong at in your day-to-day life, then even the bit that you focused on won't recover fully. Does that make sense? As in, if you cannot do a shoulder press with a reasonable weight, as in say your child is 8, 9, 10 kilos, right? Something along those lines. You should be able, right, to pick that child up off the ground, place him or her on your hips, and maybe even hold him or her up, right, above your head and going Gucci Gaga and wee and all that type of fun stuff, right? If you cannot do that with reasonable form, so if that means that you need to lean back a lot and you have no core activation and you feel it in your lower back and all that type of stuff, then because you are too weak in your shoulders to do it with proper form, so to speak, then what are we even doing this for? Right? You don't want to be at the stage, and I train a lot of women, right? They come to me, a lot of postpartum women. I mean, and they come to me, say 6 to 8 weeks after giving birth, right? We do shoulder presses and all that type of stuff pretty much week 2 and 3 in our strength training sessions, right? It is pretty early on that we start that. That we start that stuff, and I'll just look this up because let me just see where we're starting in home workout strength B. I'll be stunned. Reverse lunges, good bridge, strength B for advanced and all that type of stuff. Let me open up one of the HPMB programs. And like I said, the generally have upper body strength weeks 2, 3AB. So yeah, month 2. So pretty much there's already stuff in BTs and rows. So after 4 weeks of yeah, so the first 4 weeks are all pretty much, because the program is of course slightly different. The program moves a bit slower than PT does. First 4 weeks, pretty much all core related and glute related stuff and all that sort of thing, pelvic floor stuff. And then weeks 5 to 8, the strength sessions associated with that already incorporate upper body stuff. Because we need to do more than just core stuff and leg stuff and all that sort of thing for like 3, 4, 5 months. We need to make sure that as part of the rehab, well, the biggest part of rehab isn't a narrow focus for me. It's the most important bit of that is that you are able to do the normal things that you have to do in daily life, that you're able to do that. Rehab isn't complete until you can do that. Rehab isn't complete when, for instance, for a shoulder injury, when you can move your shoulder properly again. That is not complete rehab. It just means that you can move your shoulder again. You still need to be able to lift heavy things or do shoulder presses and with a reasonable weight. That is in a weight that you need in life and a weight that allows you to come across life situations where, I don't know, moving house, going on holiday, for instance, going on holiday, getting on a plane and sticking your luggage in the overhead compartment, right? If you cannot do that safely without hurting your shoulder or without requiring assistance because other parts hurt that should not be hurting, right? Then your rehab isn't really complete. Do you know what I mean? As in the rehab is supposed to be able to get you from not being able to do normal life things to being able to do all the normal life things that you need to do. And of course, there's tons of people out there that are not quite strong enough to do all these things at the moment, even though they're physically, they don't have any injuries. They're just, for want of a better phrase, too weak to do it. That's a different beast altogether. I think all those people need a significant amount of strength training in their life. But fundamentally, that needs to be part of rehab, especially postpartum. Right? If you have pelvic girdle pain and all the focus is on recovering from that, but you're then too weak to get to basically get in and up and down from your comfy chair or something like that without a lot of momentum, then your rehab isn't complete. It needs to be part of that, all the normal life stuff. If you have pelvic girdle pain and it goes away, but you can't pick stuff up off the floor anymore, or you have a weak pelvic floor, that's one of those. Your pelvic floor is, the rehab element is now done, but you still can't pick stuff up off the floor without hurting your back, because your back muscles at that stage are fundamentally quite weak, because you never spend any time focusing on doing those things as part of your recovery program or your continuation of training program. Then the rehab element has actually set you back more than it has helped. Well, maybe that's an exaggeration, but but it is then part hindered in a way that it didn't really need to. Right? So, and I know I'm waffling a lot here. I hope it makes sense, because I'm trying to be very careful that I don't come across, that I don't upset a particular people that have different rehab programs, right? The rehab element of postpartum exercise, the postpartum rehab element of a postpartum exercise program, let me put it that way, should not be the sole focus for 3, 4, 5, 6 months. That's all I'm trying to say. You should, as part of your postpartum exercise program, you should be things like training your shoulder, training your back. You should be training your biceps, training your triceps, and all that type of stuff. There should be a normal strength training element to that. That's fundamentally what I'm trying to say. I just took, 15, 20 minutes to get to the point. Yeah, 25 minutes. So it's you want to make sure that you get your bicep curls in, you get your back flies in, you get your shoulder presses in, you get your seated rows in, and all. And in the program with resistance band rows and T's and Y's and all that type of stuff. If you have access to a gym, then you need to get some heavy lifting stuff in as part of your postpartum program. As soon as possible, sooner rather than later. The advice of don't lift anything too heavy is terrible advice once you are able to get your core going the way it kind of should be going. That is when you immediately, so, and that is, I've always said, it's 4 to 6 weeks, right? That is how long that takes for that, what I still call it activation stage, and I'm not going to change it because that's what people understand. For that 4 to 6 week activation stage, get through that, get stuff working when it's supposed to be working. Then you immediately start doing things on top of the element. You start working body parts on top of the things that you're trying to rehab. Because otherwise, you're going to be working against you way too much. You're working against yourself, and that will, sooner or later, inevitably bite you in the bum. Right? because it'll genuinely start working against you after a while. And I've seen way too many people do a postpartum recovery program, postpartum exercise program, and they only focus on the TVA, the diastasis, and the diastasis and the pelvic floor stuff. They ignore upper body stuff. And by the time they then get to the gym and the diastasis is healed and the pelvic floor is fine and all that sort of stuff, they're either going months back or they can't do normal stuff without, again, their back hurting. And then it's not because, so for instance, for shoulder presses, just lifting weights in general, it's not that the diastasis is then still a problem, or the core isn't doing what it's supposed to do. It's that every other thing is nowhere near as strong as it should be, and therefore you're doing things with bad form and you start leaning back and all that type of stuff. And therefore your lower back then starts hurting because you're leaning back way too far. Do you know what I mean? So please make sure that there's always an element of doing other things. Working arms is part of your postpartum recovery. Like I said, 26 minutes it took me to say that, to kindly get to the point. Apologies for that. It's a waffly episode. I'm all over the place. But I hope it makes sense. On that happy note, the next 3 weeks we just have interviews. So, like I said, next week, traditional Chinese medicine, which is awesome. Brian Crawford is phenomenal. Then Beth Mittelman, who is a therapist, a mind-blowing interview. Absolutely mind-blowing about attachment theory. Oh boy, you're going to love that one. And I did one with Io Hayes about open adoption and all that sort of thing. Now, I know all adoptions in the UK are open anyways, but it's open adoption versus closed adoption and all that type of stuff. You're going to love that. I've got a ton more interviews coming up, 5 or 6. So, the next few weeks, you hear a bit less of me waffling and a bit more structured conversation. Anyways, peter@healthypostnatalbody.com. If you made it this far, peter@healthypostnatalbody.com. Thank you very much, by the way, everybody who's listening, who has very kindly left ratings on Spotify and Apple and all that sort of stuff. I've seen and if you're watching on YouTube, we've started up the podcast on YouTube again, just with stills and all that sort of stuff. That is predominantly we had to do that. Right, we had to do that because YouTube sent me an email saying we're going to demonetize the channel. And what I currently do for YouTube is I've monetized it with subscribers and watch hours and all that type of stuff. You need to hit certain levels, and then I make sure there are no ads in front of any of the videos and all that sort of thing. So I switch all the monetization off. I don't have that option if YouTube says you're no longer in charge of your own monetization. They'll start putting ads in front of absolutely everything because that's what they do. And then they'll take all that money for themselves, right? And like I said, I don't monetize anything. So I don't get any money because I don't put ads anywhere. But it's kind of someone called it a reverse Uno, right? Make sure you have enough subscribers and watch hours and all. So if you have nothing better to do and you want to open up a tab and run it in the background to watch a couple of these things, or have a couple of these things open on the YouTube channel, they'll help us out a little bit. Right? Because it allows me to keep everything free of ads and all that sort of thing, because I really don't want YouTube to stick stuff in front of our exercise videos. We're almost there, I think, but that's why we're up on YouTube again and all that sort of thing. It's a pain in the neck, to be honest, to throw one up on YouTube all the time. But hopefully we'll keep it up and then we won't have any issues with that. Anyways, peter@healthypostnatalbody.com. If you have any questions or comments or all that sort of stuff, here's a new bit of music. You take care of yourself. All right? Bye now.
I didn't sleep a wink last night, the storm was in my head. I was contemplating, tossing and turning in my bed. This is how it feels when all the welcomes have worn out. I guess the jig is up, it's time I head out. I'm leaving this town, I'm taking the same horse as before, not coming back around. If you feel like showing me the door, not gonna say see you later, 'cause you know I'm superstitious. I'll take one last kiss and all of your well wishes, 'cause I'm leaving this town. I don't need much, I'll leave my baggage all behind. Don't know where I'm going, who I'll be or what I'll find. Gonna head out west until the money all runs out. Looks like the sun is up, it's time I head out. I'm leaving this town, I'm taking the same horse as before, not coming back around. If you feel like showing me the door, not gonna say see you later, 'cause you know I'm superstitious. I'll take one last kiss and all of your well wishes, 'cause I'm leaving this town. Yeah, I'm leaving this town.